Y'all know what time it is. It is the one and only Bulldozed with your boy Drew Stevens, Josh M. Hicks up here on the mic. And I know it's been a while. He shouldn't have left you, in the words of my brother Gave. But we're here now, and we're gonna talk to you all things Bulls, especially coming off the draft lottery and combine that we participated in last week. Um, we had the very good pleasure of talking to former Portland Trailblazer star Brandon Roy, and let's just say he understands what Lonzo Ball is going through. He has a history of injuries, especially in regards to his knees, that led to an early retirement for such an unfortunate talent that he was. And we had the pleasure of asking him, how can Lonzo Ball handle the situation that he's handling? What's the best way to go about it? And what advice would he give him if he was able to talk to him? His biggest thing was pretty much be selfish. It's me time, and take advantage of that, and making sure that that the body's back to full health, and be okay with the fact that at the end of the day, you may not be back to 100% of the all-star caliber player that you were. We accept the fact that we may not get 80% Lonzo Ball, 70, 60% Lonzo Ball consistently, but at the end of the day, he still can contribute in such a way that can help teams win. And one of the ways that he can do that is by changing his game, altering his game a little bit. A player that he brings up that Lonzo Ball can model his game after is Andre Miller, former veteran point guard in the league that's been in the league for quite a long time, and made a living of being precise on the court and being a floor general on the court, which is something that Lonzo Ball has the capability of doing. But he believes that is the key to bringing the longevity back to Lonzo Ball's career, which in this case, especially for Bulls fans, it's encouraging to hear, but you still got some question marks down the line that you need to still consider. Drew, obviously, is the guru that you are. Give the advice to the mic. Give your advice on the mic and let Bulls Nation know what was your thoughts behind Brandon Roy and the input he had to say, and is that something that could be beneficial for the Bulls, considering even though Lonzo Ball, I think now is going on the third year of his 4-year deal this upcoming season. It's hard for the Bulls to see the Bulls completely getting rid of him because of the contract that he has. Talk about how this could potentially benefit the Bulls in the long run if they do choose to stay and keep Lonzo Ball and expect him to be back in the rotation, whether it's this year or next year.
Well, I mean, first of all, man, you're being humble right now. Let's give credit where credit is due. You snatched up Brandon Roy. You were able to chop it up with him, and I think just the fact that you were able to do that was big, because when you think about players in the NBA who've had their careers cut short due to injury, I think he's one of the first players that you think of. And what are the odds of him being in the building representing the Blazers at the draft lottery a little over a week ago now? For you to be able to chop it up with him, I thought that was pretty cool, man. Hearing his perspective on it, because it's one thing for us to talk about how Lonzo Ball should move forward, given his injury history now and how bleak things look for him. But to get it kind of straight from the cow's mouth, somebody that's been there before and unfortunately was not able to make a return, or the type of return he wanted to make from injury, I thought that was pretty cool, man. But I don't know if necessarily it was something the Bulls can really grab a hold of necessarily. I think he made some very interesting points just in terms of giving Lonzo advice to be patient and to take his time. But then also what you alluded to as well in terms of him being comfortable not being 100% of what he was every night, and being okay with being 80% Lonzo Ball one night, 95 the next, maybe 75 another night. I thought that was pretty interesting, but I don't know. We're talking about high-level athletes, man, who are accustomed to playing at a certain level. Obviously, as you go along the season, there's going to be bumps and bruises, and I think every player who plays consistently enough is going to, incur these injuries to a certain extent, and maybe not be 100% by the time the season is concluding. But um, to ask somebody who's accustomed to playing at a certain level to now be okay with not being his fully realized self, that's a tough ask, and I wonder how Lonzo Ball might react when and if he does come back. I think, by now, most of us are probably under the impression that Lonzo's not going to play next year. You know, I think the Bulls have to go into training camp and into next season with a different plan in mind. And if he happens to come back, that's kind of icing on the cake. I think Billy Donovan even alluded to that, they can't expect him to come through the door and be a part of this team, a contributing part of this team next season. It's not the way it's looking when he's had a surgery that's so rare for NBA players or athletes in general, on top of what he's already gone through before agreeing to such a solution, possible solution. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting as well with Brandon Roy when he mentioned to me that at the end of the day, he could have came back in the league, but he chose not to because of the fact that he couldn't live with the fact that he was not going to be Brandon Roy of old, and he didn't want to constantly hear that from everyone while he's on the court. He didn't want to hear it from spectators on TV, media, etc., saying that you're not what you used to be. He couldn't fathom that. But he also acknowledged that Lonzo Ball doesn't have to go through what he went through because of the fact that Lonzo Ball is so young and the fact that his body can catch up in ways that Brandon Roy's body, quite frankly, just couldn't. And I think Lonzo Ball is a different player when you talk about mentality-wise than Brandon Roy. You're talking about Brandon Roy, who was a legitimate all-star and was on the verge of really being a superstar in this league. And his career just got short, and he just couldn't fathom that he can't be an all-star again. Lonzo Ball's not an all-star, but he has all-star caliber, talent. And the way he's mentally approached the game, he's never had to be like the guy on a team. So because of that, I think he's willing to potentially think back and be okay with the fact that, you know what, as long as I'm still in the league making checks, I'm good. I can contribute. I still want to play at the best level possible, but I've already secured a nice amount of bread from the Bulls with that contract deal. I'm not going to get that again, but I can still keep the checks coming in, and I can be a contributor. I think he would handle that better than what Brandon Roy would and has, especially at that time.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about a time where Brandon Roy, he was like 27 when he retired. That's wild. I'm 20, I'm going on 29 next month. So, to be able to say I'm 27, I'm about to retire in a league where he wasn't like a one and done player. Like I think he spent like 2 or 3 years in college at Washington before he went pro. So his career, you're talking about maybe it's less than a decade.
Yeah.
And, he got cut out the league quick. Where Lonzo Ball, he's already been about, going on 5-6 years in the league. And he has a way of, with his talent, if he does adjust his game to help have that longevity. He's not going to have that athleticism and explosiveness that he used to have. But if he can't, like he said when he mentioned Andre Miller, I think that's a perfect point guard to think about. We talk about someone who is very defensive savvy, always precise in his decision making, and being a floor general, setting up players on the court, which is Lonzo's specialty. And on top of that, he can improve his jump shot for sure, and continue to build on that. But Andre Miller was someone that just got the job done.
Yeah.
I can see being Lonzo Ball being that type of player. And if he really was to take that advice seriously, yeah, you may look at Lonzo Ball maybe being in the league as long as his knees keep up and his health keeps up, being in the league for at least 10 plus years. But obviously, right now it's looking real blank, and the Bulls don't have time to waste.
No.
So since they don't have time to waste, according to, I didn't tell nobody this, so this is breaking news for you. Per conversations with other people, especially specifically from a source that I talked to at the draft lottery and have been keeping in touch with, he mentioned that the big talk around the league now is what are the Bulls going to do with the actual roster itself? It's not necessarily the point guard position. What are they going to do with that point guard position? But what are they actually going to do with the roster as a whole? That's the biggest thing that the league is more worried about. Is Vooch going to come back? Are they going to trade DeMar DeRozan? Is Zach LaVine potentially going to be at the market? Well, to go along, we can dive into some of that with this episode based on some of our reporting, but also things that we've heard around the league. And the first option we could talk about is obviously the Bulls actually trying to trade into a draft they just lost draft capital out of. It might be a possibility. Word around town has been, especially reported recently by NBC Sports Chicago, a very good friend of ours, and Casey Johnson, that the Bulls actually might look into trading for a top 4 pick, more specifically the 3rd pick, which is what the Portland Trailblazers do have. They've made it very known that they want to trade that 3rd pick to make sure they get a nice star or a small, nice shooting guard, a small forward to pair with Damian Lillard in that backcourt. And the Bulls potentially have 2 options. They got DeMar or you got Zach LaVine. And from what I heard, especially not just from Bulls side, but from the actual Portland side, it might be a possibility. Zach LaVine and, being traded for the 3rd pick, I'm not going to necessarily turn that down. I really wouldn't. And it shows that the Bulls are actually may not be too tied to Zach after all, because Brandon Miller made it known that, yeah, the Bulls interviewed me before we had our draft, before this press conference. Oh, really? So you want to talk to the Bulls? Want to talk to the top prospect right before you meet with everybody and let it be known? Yeah, we just had breakfast this morning. Okay, cool. So that shows me that the Bulls are trying to do due diligence. They're trying to cross all their T's and dot their I's, which means if you're going to interview a top prospect in the draft class, even though Brandon Miller made it known that he doesn't think that the Bulls are going to go that route and try to get him, you're pretty much telling me that anyone's going to have to be on the table for this to be possible. And that does include Zach LaVine. So, Drew, does this make sense for the Bulls to try and trade in their own creative, miraculous way to get the 3rd pick in the draft from Portland? Does it make sense to make this type of move?
In the sense of what Arturas has told us, told the media, told fans, it doesn't, because he seems resigned to the fact that, this roster should be held together and kept together, and the core should be kept together, and he wants to make things easier for all the pieces here, even though in doing so, that would require the Reinsdorfs to go into the tax. So from that standpoint, it doesn't make sense. He would have to really kind of have a 180 change of mind to be willing to put anybody, especially Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, on the trading block. But when you think about how this team is constructed right now and the seemingly limited number of options at the front office hands to try to make something shake with this roster to keep it moving forward, it makes a little bit of sense. Scoot Henderson is somebody that's very well thought of. I think that if Victor Wembanyama wasn't the number 1 pick, that would probably be Scoot's spot to take. He's a guy that doesn't lack for confidence. I've heard him compared to Derrick Rose. So it makes sense from that standpoint if they're going to change their minds on what they really want to do, and they are now open to rebuilding. Because if you trade Zach LaVine, I think you're pretty much rebuilding at that point. I don't know that you keep DeMar DeRozan. I think at that point you have to look to try to move off of him and really make this Scoot show, and Scoot and Patrick Williams' show, I guess you could say, and see what you have there for now. As you continue to build out things around your roster, but I still don't think that even if they dangle Zach LaVine out there as trade bait, I don't know if that's an enticing enough package for Portland to give up that third pick. You know, I think it's pretty much well known that I'm a fan of Zach's game for the most part. You know, he has his flaws for sure, but I do get enamored by the way he can score the ball. But in some ways, you know, they've kind of seen it already in Portland next to Damian Lillard. You know, with CJ McCollum, I think LaVine is a better version of CJ McCollum for sure. But I think, you know, they need to put somebody next to him that has offense but can also do some things defensively too. I don't know who that player would be, but I don't think Zach LaVine and the Bulls are at the top of the list for Portland in terms of teams they'll be looking toward to move that third pick.
I've heard that's a very good point, by the way. But I've heard that top 3 players that Portland will be looking for in that type of spot to pair with Dame would be Mikal Bridges, Pascal Siakam, or a disgruntled star in Boston right now in Jaylen Brown. Now, is it ideal right now? Depending on the situations, I think Pascal Siakam makes the most sense when you talk about potentially, you know, teams willing to trade off of those players to get them. Brooklyn just got Mikal Bridges. I don't feel that they're going to want to just let him go that quickly.
Yeah. Especially with what he showed in the playoffs. He looked like, man, just a different player with increased responsibilities offensively. Like, we know what he can do defensively, but the way that he, you know, demonstrated what he can do with the ball in his hands and being kind of that number one option for that team that he was a part of, that was eye-opening to me, at least, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think, you know, Sean Marks is going to be willing to just let that go right off the bat. And obviously Jaylen Brown, we're still trying to figure out what he's going to do with his situation. But I've heard that those are 3 options that not only the Blazers really want to go after, but Dame himself will want to go after. That's why I mentioned Mikal Bridges number 1.
And what I think they need somebody that also is can bring some defense to the table. I think Jaylen Brown may be a little overrated defensively, but in all, I think we would say that those 3 guys are a cut above Zach LaVine.
Yeah, very, very much so. But let's just say, you know, they can get Zach. Let's just say that they really interested in Zach. Imagine this 3-team trade. Because it's going to have to be a 3-team trade to make this possible. Between Brooklyn, the Bulls, and the Blazers. All right? So 3-team trade. The Bulls get Anthony Simons, Nick Claxton, and the 3rd pick. Trailblazers get Zach LaVine and Mikal Bridges. And Brooklyn gets Nurkic, Matisse Thybulle, and Portland's 1st-round pick from the Knicks. I'm just saying that don't sound too bad, especially considering the Bulls knowing that if you are trading Zach LaVine, like you said, it's pretty much a rebuild. You're done. You might as well just retool. I wouldn't mind retooling with the 3rd overall pick, which in this draft, from what I've heard, that's a guaranteed Scoot Henderson slot. With Victor Wembanyama going number 1, and Charlotte, I've heard reportedly, is in love with Brandon Miller. They love him, and it makes the most sense for them because you got LaMelo Ball there.
Yeah.
So you got Victor Wembanyama going number 1. You have Brandon Miller going 2 to Charlotte. The Bulls get that 3rd slot. That's your point guard. That's Scoot Henderson. That's the game changer. I can see why the Bulls are trying to pull this off. If this is true, I can see why the Bulls are trying to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And it's with Brooklyn. They get someone and Zach that can score the ball, but at the same time, guess what? If they're willing to get rid of Mikal, you know, you get a couple role players, you get a 1st-round pick, with Mikal Bridges is worth a first round pick, and you get you get one of Dame's guys to go along with Zach LaVine in Portland. That's something serious. And if the Bulls were to pull that off, I can't even be mad at them now. Like, I really can't even be mad at them. Like, they're going to be reviving themselves from the debacle of the Nikola Vucevic trade.
Possibly, yeah. I'm a visual learner, so I'm trying to remember all the moving pieces you had in that proposed deal.
I should have sent this to you. My bad, bro.
No, it's all good. I feel like that might be selling Mikal Bridges short, like in terms of I'm trying to remember who was moving where and who would be for. There's also, I'm thinking about this out loud, so bear with me for a second. There's also part of me that worries about building a team around a small guard. You know, God bless Derrick Rose and the player that he was before the injuries. But I just don't know, man, about how far, again, a small guard, questionable outside shot, how far that gets you. Now, that's not me saying that, you know, with a deal like this or something similar to it, that wouldn't be a better way to go than what path the Bulls are on right now. I'm just, like I said, I'm kind of thinking this through and trying to think of like how it would be moving forward, and also understanding that other moves would have to be made on the heels of that one, in order for it to make like a ton of sense. You know, you got to shop DeMar, maybe you let Vooch walk. Just thinking it out loud. Just thinking about it out loud. That's all. Portland would definitely be happy to have that, to make that deal for sure.
Yeah, I definitely feel like they would. And I hear your point on the small guard, building around a small guard. But Anthony Simons doesn't have to be your long-term solution.
True.
He's on a very team-friendly deal right now, and having a team-friendly deal like that, Anthony Simons can keep you relevant while the Bulls go through a retooling or rebuilding phase until they get the guys that they want. You know, he doesn't have to be a long-term solution, which I think when you think about that consideration, and it gives you more time to pair younger players like that with Patrick Williams.
Yeah.
It gives a good look at what the Bulls really do have within that really young core. And based off of that, you can really move forward. But at least you made some moves that can be beneficial, and you can get some type of capital off of this. And this is just with, you know, Zach LaVine potentially being in the mix. We're not even talking about what we could potentially get if we were to trade DeMar DeRozan on top of that, which most likely would be the next move, because you probably can get more value off of DeMar than you could off of Zach.
See, I think Zach gives you more value. That's just me, though. That's just me, because, you know, you got to remember DeMar is going to be on an expiring contract. Although he had a pretty good season last season, he was starting to get nicked up and missing games. And he's not as what's the word I want to use here? He's not as, like, you can't put him on a lot of different rosters the way you can Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine can damn near fit everywhere. DeMar DeRozan, you got to have the right kind of shooting, the right kind of defense around him. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think obviously I'm still of the mind that they need to try to move off of DeMar DeRozan, but I think they really missed their mark by not doing it sooner. Same could probably be said for Nikola Vucevic too, but you know, here we are.
Right. I definitely agree with that. But seriously, at the end of the day, though, obviously we're trying to figure out the direction of the Bulls, which is very unclear. So let's just play hypotheticals here. So the hypothetical situation was obviously Bulls number 3 pick, potentially, if something like that was to go down, which is being rumored and reported right now. But there's other rumors and reports as well that recently came out regarding homegrown talent. Derrick Rose. The man might be coming home. Like, it might be a homecoming. And according to this report that's coming out of New York, Ian Begley and those guys, great insight as far as covering the Knicks for sure, and all things New York basketball. They're saying that it's more than likely that the Knicks will not guarantee the team option on Derrick Rose's contract. And if it's not, Chicago makes the most sense in coming home. Now, when I think of this, we've had this conversation before, Drew. And I was okay with it. You were like, nah, we're good. Not yet. But when you think about the Bulls situation with this point guard, it may not actually, timing is everything. And this might be the perfect time. Because if you want to somewhat still compete, you can get out of Derrick Rose. You don't have to make him a starting point guard. But he can still contribute in the game offensively. And he's average defensively. He's not as quick as he used to be and things of that sort, but he can still give you some type of sound defense. But he gives you what you need offensively. Timely buckets. He's starting to become more of a facilitator. And he's been a lot more efficient. And over time, he has improved his three-point jump shot throughout his career. When you talk about stability in that point guard position, that fits Derrick Rose. But this is the thing that gets me the most. It's the fact that there's a bridge. He could be the veteran bridge for this team one season to the next. You know what this reminds me of? Nate Robinson.
Okay.
It reminds me of when Nate Robinson came to Chicago. For those 2 or 3 years when Derrick Rose couldn't play, they had to find point guard after point guard after point guard, 1-year deals to make sure that this ship can stay afloat. And Nate Robinson was one of those ideal players that you didn't expect to take the Bulls to where he did, but he was the right situation, right player in the right situation at the right time to keep the Bulls afloat. Derrick Rose might be that option. He can give you a year or two to let you bridge through until you actually have to get your point guard straight and you figure out what's going to happen with Lonzo Ball. And then after that, especially if Lonzo Ball's deal is going to be off the books, D Rose can ride off into the sunset, retire a Bull, and then you can bring in your new era of point guard. Because of that, and the journalism in me, and of course in you, I would love this. I would love this.
This is good because we're disagreeing on some things tonight. So this makes good stuff, man. So we seem to be in that same position we were when we talked about this. What was it? This time last year?
Yeah.
I love D Rose as much as the next Chicago Bulls fan, as much as the next homegrown Chicago man and woman, man. But I think that ship has sailed. If the goal is to get better and to improve upon this roster, the Bulls need a starting point guard who can organize the team, who can distribute the ball, who can also shoot from outside. Again, a starting point guard who can do those things. Derrick Rose, to me, doesn't fit. He doesn't check enough of those boxes for the Bulls to really entertain the idea of bringing him home. Not to mention, if they end up running this thing back with a lot of the pieces that they have, they're not even going to have the money to bring him in, even like possibly at a vet minimum deal. His team option that New York has for next season is like a little over $15 million. The veteran minimum is, I think, around $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bulls, they still have to decide after Nikola Vucevic decides where he wants to go. They still need to figure out what they're going to do with Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu.
Yep.
Still need shooting. Still need more shooting. That's a big thing for them. I just don't think that Derrick Rose is the answer. And although he would provide great leadership from the bench, be able to teach guys a lot of what he's learned over the years, that's invaluable, but he should not be at the top of their free agent wish list come this summer. I'm sorry. Like, I love me some D Rose, man. I really do, man. But if him or Kobe White or Aldasumu, or if they bring Patrick Beverly back, if one of those guys is starting, the offseason has not gotten off or did not get off to a good start.
I will say this. That's why I mentioned Derrick Rose coming off the bench. He can't play starter minutes and starter roles anymore. That's pretty much solidified. So we agree on that. But what I will say is this. What else can the Bulls do at this point? And I guess I'm saying that because, yeah, you're right. If they were to bring the Bulls, if they were to run it back, bring everybody back, you ain't gonna have no money to pay Derrick Rose. I get that. However, your point guard situation is not resolved, and you're paying all these guys back, and quite frankly, the type of point guard you're looking for, everybody will have to be gone and kind of start over if you want to get that type of guard. Which right now shows that the Bulls are not willing to do that. And I feel like if Derrick Rose really is open to coming home, he'll take that pay cut. He'll take the pay cut. This dude has been in the league for over 10 years. He's going to take he's got a lot of money. He's still getting money from Adidas, for God's sake. It's still rolling in the bank. He's okay with money. So he'll take a pay cut. That would be the light bulb in Chicago for them to be like, okay, nice but cheap labor. Cool, come on. That's what they did with Patrick Beverly. So why would they not want to apply it to Derrick Rose? And I think he'll be open to it. I think that's something that really could be reality. However, I do agree with you because at the end of the day, we need to understand the Bulls' direction. And once we understand the Bulls' direction, that can give more clarity and insight about what that should look like. But is Derrick Rose your number one option, point guard wise? No, because you got to think future. And when you think future, obviously, it's not going to be Derrick Rose in it for 3-4 more years. It's just not going to be that way.
Yeah.
However, that's why I mentioned the bridge. A bridge can get you from one place to another. D Rose may be that bridge to get us from no point guard to a point guard. From a future perspective, bearing, we figure out what's really going to happen with Lonzo Ball. And if there's no other player that you can get that can give you that type of talent, that type of leadership, and that type of pay cut, we're going to be stagnant again. And I'm not saying he's going to move the needle, but he's better than nothing. He's better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, let me pose this question to you. If it came down to them signing Derrick Rose or Aldasumu, which way you going?
That's a good question. I do think I would stick with Io. I do think I would stick with Io. Just because he's younger and he can give the boost that the Bulls do need as long as he continues to improve on his game. Yeah. But man, that's a nice consolation prize to have. Even Io, if you was using even if you have Io as your starting point guard, to have Derrick Rose come off the bench to aid that's not bad to me. Because if Io improves his skill set in his game, like we know he can grow into being a better point guard. He can grow into being a better point guard. And then having Derrick Rose coming off your bench to keep things afloat, especially if Io messes things up. I mean, that at least gives the Bulls a chance. And at this point, I'd rather have a chance than no chance at all, which this whole year, we really had no chance until Patrick Beverly came in here. And that's just the reality. So it's tough, man. I understand it's tough. I don't see how the Bulls can pull any of this stuff off. But wishful thinking, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I feel like Arturas and Mark, they have to go to the Reinsdorfs and get on their knees and plead for them to go into the tax. Because if they're going to go into the tax by just bringing the same group of guys back, why not go into the tax and try to bring something better to the table than they did last season. Again, the likelihood that the Reinsdorfs actually listen and go into the luxury tax, is slim to none. So I think that's the reason why a lot of people were calling for this team to be broken up and just blown up completely, because there's just not a whole lot of avenues available to the front office to make something shake. So, yeah, man, I got my eyes on Dennis Schroeder, Javon Carter, Gabe Vincent, who's probably played himself into some sort of contract the Bulls can't afford anyway. But it's just other guys I'm looking at before I scan to Derrick Rose.
I understand.
I'm trying, bro. You believe me? I'm trying to leave the emotion. I'm trying to pack it up, zip it up, lock it away in this discussion. It's not easy, man. I promise you, it's not. Derrick Rose he is and will always be a beloved figure here in the city, man. But I think emotions start to come into play, when his name is brought up, and rightfully so, considering that he's from the soil, considering what he did for Bulls basketball and kids around Chicago. He lived the dream that every basketball player in the city had. You know what I'm saying? He got to throw on the jersey and be the star player and lead his team into the playoffs, into the Eastern Conference Finals against the hated Miami Heat. Like, he did a lot of things for the culture, for basketball, for the city, but this isn't the same Derrick Rose, and this situation calls for something different.
I totally understand, man. I'm just cringing because you said Dennis Schroeder.
Hey, look, man. Hey. Look, man, I know he ain't like a sharpshooter or nothing, man. And that man fumbled a major bag a couple years ago, but he is a solid player, man. I think that the Bulls could do worse than trying to bring him in, man. If they were even able to do that again, they are between a rock and a hard place in terms of what they can do with this roster outside of rebuilding.
Yeah, I'm sure LeBron will be very happy to see him go. That being said, you guys,
I think he'd be more happy to see D'Angelo Russell go, but that's another story.
Oh, both can happen. He said he would retire if it ain't no gonna happen, he'll retire. So at this point, anything can happen. Heck, AD can go too. That's what that's pretty much where it seems like at this point he's contemplating about playing in general. Like you said, yeah, that's a whole other story, man. I don't want to hurt any Bron fans that's listening to this Bulldozed podcast. We'll hurt their toes later. That being said, talking about avenues, you can check out this avenue of the podcast, an episode of Bulldozed on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Check us out. Click that subscribe button because, as you can see, we bulldoze these Bulls out here. We keep it real 100 all day, always, and every day. Catch you guys later. Don't worry. We'll be back soon. From my guy, Drew, Josh M. Hicks, it's the Bigs. It's us.